Andrew Barr is a music production YouTuber who recently did a poll on 13,000 music producers to ask if they use AI tools, if they use AI generative tools, and if they've created a song within the past 6 months. I think the most interesting part of this video was the part of, do generative AI users finish songs at all within the past 6 months? And if you look at the poll here, it shows that about 50% of people who use generative AI finish songs, while the other 50% don't. And with people who don't use AI generative tools at all, it's around 2/3 who finish songs, while the other third struggle. And to me, I was interested in, why does the other third of people not finish songs? Because I feel like that's a glaring problem still. You would have hoped that would have been more in the 80% mark. So the video does make a point that those who use generative AI music get hit by this dopamine hit of generating the music, which means they don't have to worry about the idea of releasing the music. And as a result, they end up in this limbo where they've made the music, but they don't actually care about releasing the music. I think that same problem comes up with those who don't use generative AI. And what I mean by that is, if you end up making an 8-bar loop or a verse or a chorus using non-generative AI means, you just create it with a guitar or you create it with plugins, whatever you use, you end up with a song that is simply an 8-bar loop that seems finished, and you enjoy that 8-bar loop, and as a result, it doesn't grow into anything more. It doesn't become more of a song. It just becomes this enjoyable little 30-second loop that you can enjoy. So in the same way that an AI generative person creates this song and gets the satisfaction from a complete song that wasn't made by them, those who don't use generative AI end up with this 8-bar loop that is, to most people, they would consider it unfinished, but it's finished to them because all they have is this 8-bar loop. It becomes an unfinished mini song. Which goes on to my next point, which is, I think this third of people who don't release their songs have a problem with the song's identity. So often you will create this mini 8-bar loop, or you create this verse or chorus, whatever it needs to be, but it doesn't really have a purpose or a point. There is no lyrics, there's no purpose to it, it's not making a message or anything like that, there's no identity. And as a result of making something that has no identity, you don't really know where to take it from there, and you don't really know where it belongs in your mind of creative music. When it comes to AI music and that same kind of problem, it's probably the fact that it does have an identity, but it isn't related to your identity, because you didn't create that music yourself. It's part of the AI's identity. So basically the same problem. You don't relate to the identity, or it doesn't even have a real identity in relation to you. You don't really bother releasing it, because what's the point of it? And I think the final point is that when you create a song, you can generally see all of its flaws and all of its issues. So for example, with an AI generated song, you know that that isn't your voice, you know that it isn't you who created it. Meanwhile, those who don't use AI generated music are already aware of the flaws that they have, because they know their limitations. They know that maybe they're not so good at the mixing, or maybe their guitar technique wasn't all that good, or maybe they don't know how to make it sound bigger, or how to make it sound more concise. And as a result, they know that it has a lot of flaws and that there's a lot more that it could be, but they're at the limit of what they're capable of. And as a result, whether you generated the music or you didn't generate the music, you're aware of what the flaws are, and because of those flaws, you don't want to expose that to the rest of the world, and as a result, you don't release the music. So finally, I'm just going to talk about those who don't use generative AI and just go through some things to keep in mind when it comes to finally releasing a song. So one, I think that you need to make sure that if you choose a song of your massive collection of 50, 100 random loops that you have in your collection, that you take one of those loops and you try and expand it beyond those 8 bars, and be willing to accept that this little container that it's in, this little 8-bar loop, it can be much bigger, and it's going to be flawed as a result, and things are going to change. This will actually be the complete song that you have and that you can finally release. whatever that song is or whatever that little collection is, to actually give it a name. I think giving it a name actually gives it an identity. So it could be called Shadow or something like that. And that means that you actually have an idea of, okay, this is what it's about. It's about my shadow half of myself, whatever it needs to be, you know. As soon as you give it a name, it starts having an identity for itself, and you can start actually making the music around that concept. And finally, it's to understand that this song, it's going to be flawed, it's going to be possibly rubbish, but that you should accept it as it is and decide to finish it anyway. And whether or not you want to release that song or not is up to you, but to finally accept and say that this song is finished is, I think, an important part of moving on to make your better track in the future. So I think that's all I have time for today, but yeah, I just wanted to make this video because I found this subject quite interesting, and I just wanted to try out some more YouTube stuff as it's been a very long time. So yeah, cheers, thanks for watching, bye.